Right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's edition of LSU Science Café. My name is Steve Beck with the Office of Research and Economic Development. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to our special edition of Science Café for tonight's show. At this point, it is my pleasure to introduce and hand off the reins to my colleague and friend, Dean Cynthia Peterson, who is the Dean of the LSU College of Science. Dean Peterson.
Thank you, Steve. I really appreciate that nice introduction. I want to welcome everyone here. It's exciting for me to see that we have good participation tonight. We're going to spend some time tonight talking about COACHE. And I imagine you chimed in because you're wanting to know a little bit more. So LSU is participating for the first time ever in the Collaborative on Academic Careers in Higher Education. That's COACHE. It's a survey on faculty job satisfaction. So this survey covers many dimensions of the faculty experience, and it's going to help all of us at LSU better understand the opportunities and challenges that faculty face as they pursue their scholarship, teaching, and service. It's important to note that this survey is a national survey. It has participants that include a large number of universities across the country. And what that means for us is that we're going to be able to interpret results for our campus in the context of results from other R1 universities. This allows for benchmarking and will allow us certainly to own the things that are going well, but also to prioritize areas that do need some attention. So the plan is for LSU to participate in COACHE, and it's a plan that's been in the works for several years. I'm really pleased that we were able to support the COACHE survey with an NSF grant that was awarded to a team of faculty and researchers and campus leaders here at LSU. We find ourselves in really unusual times in higher education. COVID presented challenges that required rapid changes almost exactly a year ago. You know, how often have we heard the term pivot, beginning last March? And that pivoting actually has led to a situation with COVID that's now persisted for so long that it really is taking a toll. I imagine some of you saw a recent article in Nature entitled, "Pandemic Burnout is Rampant in Academia." That underscores this. We also have a new and much sharper focus across the country on systemic racism, precipitated by the horrific events of summer 2020, with the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and others. And now LSU finds itself facing an ugly situation with Title IX investigations, and changes are happening in real time in response to that situation. We find ourselves at LSU in a time of deep introspection, and all of this impacts the faculty experience at the workplace. So we'll be able to understand our experience in the context of our peers by participating in COACHE. I do want to repeat what I said earlier. We've wanted to do this for quite a number of years, certainly before the difficulties that 2020 represents actually crossed our pathways. So this is a survey for faculty, for all faculty across the university. I'm pleased to tell you as of today, we have 40% of our faculty who have completed the survey. All eligible faculty at LSU should have received a link to the survey, and if you haven't, I'll put something in the chat box in a minute that will give you email addresses where you can actually attend to that. I do want everyone to be reminded that the survey closes on April 12th. Another thing I want to emphasize is that this survey is anonymous. Your participation is anonymous. That's guaranteed. No personal identifiers are linked to the data that we're going to get. LSU will receive only de-identified data. So tonight we have a great panel who are going to share some thoughts about leading the faculty of the future. Our panel includes our Vice President for Research and Economic Development, Sam Bentley, our Vice President for Strategic Initiatives, Isaiah Warner, and our Provost, Stacy Haney. They'll share with us some thoughts about the value of COACHE in supporting innovation and progress, and again, leading the faculty of the future. COACHE is a project centered at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and so we're honored to have another panelist with us tonight. That's Dr. Kiernan Matthews, who is the Program Director for COACHE. Dr. Matthews received his MD at the University of Pennsylvania, and he is the Executive Director and the Principal Investigator of COACHE. He also is the Educational Chair of the Seminars on Leadership of the Faculty. I will say I was privileged to be able to attend one of those at the Harvard Institutes for Higher Education. Kiernan's research and writing explores the condition of faculty at colleges and universities with particular emphasis on equity and on the effective engagement of all faculty in organizational change. At COACHE, Kiernan leads the project Strategic Planning, Research and Development. In these roles, he also provides counsel for senior administrators about the academic workplace and the use of faculty data in a shared governance context. His work intersects variously with the activities of provosts, deans, institutional researchers, diversity officers, sponsored projects, general counsel, institutional review boards, finance officers, faculty senates, and department chairs. At national conferences and on COACHE campuses, Kiernan regularly leads workshops, guides discussions, and provides counsel for academic policymakers. We are so honored and privileged to have him with us tonight. Dr. Matthews has a presentation that he's going to share with us to help us learn more about COACHE. And it's now my pleasure to turn this over to him. Kiernan.
Thank you, Dean Peterson. Hopefully everyone can hear me all right. I am really privileged to be here. Really, I've been a fan of working with LSU for a long time, I've gotten to know Dr. Wilson Kennedy and Dean Peterson through their attendance at these institutes that we run in the summers at Harvard. And I've, just really fortunate that they've included COACHE in their plans and their NSF Advance work with you, because I'm hoping that we can bring some of the benefits of transparency, of data-driven conversations, of equity mindedness to the faculty of Louisiana State University. So I am going to figure out how to move my slides along here appropriately, and I will we'll get right underway. So COACHE we're a small but mighty team. We are Obi, Lauren, Todd, Young, Mai, and Amal, and myself. But I am, we're all virtual now, and I'm talking to you from Arlington, Massachusetts, which borders Cambridge. It was the bloodiest site of the American Revolution, of the American Revolution's first day, I should say, as British regulars retreated from Concord and Lexington after the shot heard around the world. By then, the silent shot of devastating epidemics had decimated the Massachusetts people, and they had named this area Menotomy and lived around what we call the Mystic Lake now. So saying all this to acknowledge the debt that I owe to the original settlers of this land and to their living descendants. So COACHE, we're a process. What LSU is adopting here is not just data or a survey. It's really a commitment to a process. And that process, as I highlight here, is to engage faculty, to do it over and over and over again till you're say uncle, if that's what it takes. But we believe that faculty engagement in the authorship of the university's future is essential for higher education sustainability. I could I could have a whole presentation of all the wonderful things that different universities have done with COACHE, and you can Google COACHE with that E at the end, that's silent E. You can Google COACHE and Virginia Tech if you want to see a full report of what LSU, something like what LSU will get eventually. But we have universities like the University of Denver have very clear processes and plans for 3 years after getting their data for town halls and additional analyses, working with small groups of faculty to really leverage the data. It's a toolbox you can keep going to every time you have a decision to make, or every time you want to understand your faculty and each other. The Vanderbilt University also has a wonderful COACHE website where they're reporting out all the actions that they've done in the time that they've been working with us. So those are just some examples of the sort of work that can flow from this, but it starts with faculty first, and it starts with enlightened leadership who are unafraid to ask, how are you doing? Or in fact, are unafraid to ask, how am I doing? That's the courageous leader. So we hope that we look forward to seeing what LSU will do with these results. I was asked to really focus on some things that we've learned from these data that might tell us about the faculty of the future. And my organizing principle that I've decided to use for today, in the very limited time that I have, is to present you with some 5 rationalizations that faculty, chairs, and administrators use all the time. 5 rationalizations or alibis to arrest change. I don't think faculty are resistant to change, by the way. I mean, I love faculty. I work with faculty. I've been studying faculty for 16 years. Some of us study spectroscopy for a career. I study faculty for a career, and to know you is to love you. And like I said, I believe you are the future of the academy. But so you're not resistant to change. You're committed to something else. And getting to understand what those commitments are is the first step to transforming the academy to be a more inclusive and equitable place for everyone. So I'm going to present these sort of these five alibis, if you will, and maybe provoke you. Maybe if there were tomatoes that you could virtually throw at me, I might get a few of those. But I hope that these would, if you take these back to your departments, you might get some discontinuous departures, some delightfully deviant thoughts on what could be instead of just what is. And the first I'm starting with is the faculty would never agree to this because, and the challenge to that is what we call COACHE's, well, the first law of COACHE, and that is that there is no capital F faculty. There are many faculties. The provost certainly knows this. There's greater variability in kind of faculty phenotypes within an institution than there are between institutions. So your sense that the faculty experience is more or less like your own is reinforced by the faculty groups where you spend the most time in your department, at your disciplinary meetings, or so on. So until or unless you're engaged in the life of the university beyond your own department or these other areas, you might be unaware of your own assumptions that you have about faculty, your biases about what faculty life is like at LSU. So ask yourself, what might be wrong or incomplete with my own assumptions about college faculty? And really try to create opportunities to learn from and listen to faculty different from you. That's something that the COACHE survey allows through the quantitative piece, but to some extent, but really through the qualitative results that we draw from as well. So, for example, junior faculty, that's a phrase that we ditched about 15 years ago. Why? The average age of the assistant pre-tenure faculty member in our data set, the median is 38, the mean is 39. Let's not call them junior faculty anymore. We call them pre-tenure faculty. These faculty aren't just dealing with childcare, but at the other end, they're dealing with elder care for their parents, especially through this calamity of a year that we've had. So, or they're managing their own failing health or their partners. So, the assumptions we have about what a junior assistant professor wants out of the engagement with their university is sometimes colored by our assumption that they are, have young families or, want to go out at night to stay out late and on Bourbon Street. Like these things are not happening anymore. because faculty careers have changed. So I encourage you to get to know these data. You can, not just through COACHE, but you have data at your own institution, in your own disciplines that can help situate you and understand, how long might I expect to spend as an associate professor, for example? And is the length of time that I've spent at this rank normal for my discipline, normal for my type of institution? And if not, how do I talk to my chair? Maybe I can talk to my chair or dean about what it takes to move ahead. And I'll get more to that a little bit later. So I'm giving myself 3 minutes for each of these. So I'm going to keep a brisk pace. The second alibi I have is that we can't broaden our definition of excellence because, and I'm going to ask you to fill in these because what we're trying to do in the academy more recently is to create a sense of what does an inclusive excellence mean. But a lot of people are worried about what that inclusive excellence might knock down the prestige of our institution, or we don't know how to evaluate these things that seem a little bit more nebulous to us. So I'm going to give you an example of a university that is a top, in the top 75 U.S. News and World Report that has adopted some substantial changes to how it defines excellence. What this institution did was, it's a STEM dominant university, and they saw in their COACHE results big problems for associate professors. Among all associates, there were comparatively worse dissatisfaction with the process, lack of clarity and feedback about getting to full. Associates suffered from poor mentoring, and women in this rank and faculty of color were worse off than men and white faculty on nearly all dimensions. So the university looked at their institutional data that you don't need a survey for, by the way, that you don't need this, this constant drumbeat of please take the COACHE survey to understand. You can mine this from your own departments, from your schools or colleges, from the institutional research office. And they saw that women tenured faculty were much more likely than men to still be in the associate rank after 13 years since their PhD. So a band of faculty got together, not the provost, not an administrator from the dark side. It was a band of faculty that got together, and armed with COACHE and institutional data, they won a $1 million grant from the NSF to broaden the definition of scholarship for promotion, not tenure. They started with promotion, among other interventions and mentoring and so on. These are called the kind of Boyer, this is the Boyer model of scholarship. And this was introduced, I think, the late 80s, early 90s. I've been talking about this for a generation. And in the last 5 years, we've seen more and more institutions, and land grant institutions like LSU, or public and land grant institutions like LSU, have particular opportunities to adopt this sort of, these definitions, these ideas of what scholarship can mean. As a result, for the institution could, under the new policy, they're seeing a larger proportion of successful promotion candidates emphasizing these non-discovery forms of scholarship. So they're seeing greater diversity in the types of scholarship that's helping folks come up for promotion to full. The gender gap in associate to full promotion success rate has been narrowing. So they've been both the success rate by gender and the numbers of promotions are more equal since the policy change. I told you I'd move along quickly, so I'm going to keep doing that. What I want to emphasize here is that this has really important implications for leadership paths. So tenure and promotion committees decide who gets to be in the club. So now at this university, more diverse committees are making those decisions about who belongs. And don't forget this also, you're unlikely to become a dean, a provost, a president if you are not a full professor. So this university is expanding the pipeline to the top administrative roles. And these people who have these roles will better understand and support more diverse types of faculty, more diverse conceptions of faculty and student bodies, by the way. So 2 months ago, this university's faculty voted, 90% of them voted to create a teaching path to tenure. So, after they did this, now they're moving on to that. And apropos of nothing, like I said, they're ranked in the top 75 of U.S. News and World Report, and their star is climbing. All right, so on to my our next alibi or rationalization. We can't stop making counteroffers because this is about the retention offer. The norm, the counteroffer culture in higher ed where you really aren't expected to ask for or get a raise as a faculty member unless you get an outside offer and use that as leverage in a negotiation. So I'm going to touch the hot stove here and suggest, what if we didn't do that? In any given 3-year period, about 4.1%, anywhere between 1 and 6%, but on these 5 public universities, about 4% of tenure stream faculty left these universities. And a lot of energy is spent trying to keep this tiny sliver of our faculty, and we call this the retention action. So I looked at 11 public universities in this 3-year period, and during which COACHE asks for faculty who had outside offers, how much of a salary bump were they getting from the institution trying to retain them? How much were those counteroffers worth? So we saw significant differences in the raises at the mean and the median. So remember, this is salary, so this compounds every year. This is an additional investment in these faculty every year. And so it doesn't take a field medal to do the math and answer how much more did these universities spend in salary each year as a result of these retention actions. So our intro to stats classes compel our students to focus on the central tendency. We're always talking about the mean and the median, but an equity-minded approach might ask how much in total, what's the sum that we're spending? At these institutions, in 3 years, they wound up committing $1.5 million more per year on salaries for white faculty, and less than 1/6 of that on retention raises for underrepresented faculty, and even less on Asian and Asian American faculty salaries. But we know that salary doesn't capture the full picture of support and compensation. We also asked about additional startup. So it's hard to disagree that additional startup is an investment in faculty success, but we see wide differences in how much of that investment they're getting. So on startup alone, these universities spend 20 times more on retaining white faculty than they did on retaining underrepresented faculty. Now I know what you're going to say. This is all, now I'm just throwing in all the data that we had for this 3-year period from all participating universities. You have to control for discipline, don't you? STEM faculty are so much more expensive, right? So until you control for STEM, this data doesn't mean anything to me. That's true, but STEM fields are also the whitest spaces on campus. So if the events of the last year encourage you, I hope, to consider that this is not a coincidence, this is structural. And it determines who's showing up on campus in the campus parking lot with Toyota Tercels versus Teslas. So what if, the question I'm asking is, what if we thought differently about our retention norm? So this is an example of the qualitative data that we collect about somebody's experience receiving that retention. This person identifies as a woman of color and was happy to be retained, felt the response was swift and enthusiastically and unequivocally positive, but then discovered that a white man in the college, recruited by another university, got more, a much stronger financial incentive that was not offered to his colleague down the hallway. And what this says is that there's a discrepancy between what the university will do for one person and another on the basis of their racial or gender identity. This is a failed retention. You've retained the person, but they're going to take the first offer that they get from another university. So that damage is done. So the last one I'll talk about, I mentioned 5, but I'm running out of time, is that we can't spread service equally because, and the answer of this might be, because Samuel is terrible at X. He can't run a meeting. His meetings are terrible. So let's try to avoid getting him in situations where he's running meetings. And instead, the people who wind up doing this tend to be women and tend to be faculty of color. This is the invisible work, the invisible labor of the academy. These are excerpts from our faculty job satisfaction survey, which is currently being administered at LSU. This is not data from LSU, I want to point out. This is from a couple of years ago. And these are just some examples of when we ask faculty, what's the one thing your institution can do to improve the workplace for faculty? Sure, some faculty just say salary, and it's a one-word answer and they move on. This is rich data that we get. And the one thing they're talking about is workload, it's service. It's respect. And they're asking, you're asking me to do these things. You hired me to do these things in some cases, to mentor undergraduate students of color, to advance a more diverse doctoral student body. But they're not getting rewarded for it. So there are other dimensions of the COACHE survey, like this one, that help to identify whether an institution is really supporting faculty who take on additional leadership roles to sustain the other aspects of their work while they're doing that. And this is just one example. And our data support other research about gender, not just gaps between different institutional types, but gender and racial gaps in service and workload that they're asked to perform. So the last thing I want to do tonight then is to introduce you to the Faculty Workloads and Rewards Project. I think the faculty of the future will not leave who has to do what will not have to leave who has to do what to what Carrie Ann O'Mara, who's the author of this work, the leader of this work, calls the hallway ask. So she describes in vivid terms that, you know, you're looking down this hallway, who do you ask to take on this important committee role, and whose door is open, who's bad at this work, who's always, you know, the happy warrior doing it. What these circumstances produce are you know, inequitable outcomes for the people who are gone to over and over and over again to perform this labor. What this project has done is that it created service dashboards, which faculty, not just aggregated by rank, but you start with by name. You just start counting. How many undergraduate students are you advising? How many graduate students? What's your, how many courses are you teaching? How many course preps, et cetera. And the idea isn't to make everything equal. The ultimate recommendation isn't to make everyone do the same work, but that to have that conversation with the department about the data, to say if there are differences, that those differences are there by design and not by accident. So that Samuel might advise a lot of undergrads because he enjoys it and he inspires them. He's really good at it. And Samantha runs key meetings because no one runs a good meeting like her. And she knows how to put a tight agenda together. But we're acknowledging these roles and we're rewarding these roles annually or in tenure and promotion or in other aspects, and other recognitions that we can give. So we write these things into their expectations and rewards. And that way, when Samuel or Samantha leave, we know what roles we have to fill, what we need to find, you know, what kind of aspects we need to find for somebody to take next. So this work has been published in all the right journals, and it's got a great practitioner focus, and I encourage you in your departments to seek this out. It's succeeding in changing aspects of the choice architecture of how academic departments allocate workload. These changes result in, will result in a more diverse, a more inclusive faculty down the road, and faculty, frankly, who are more appreciative of each other. And understanding of all the work that everyone does. So I'm going to leave it at that. There are lots of other advice that I can give, but ultimately what I want to leave you with is that there are, I was going to tell you how to really break the search and start all over again. But the thing I want to leave you with is that which faculty benefit most from the status quo? When we see people talk about the faculty, I just implore you to ask which faculty. That's the pregnant question in almost all of this data, and that's the equity-minded question when we start making assumptions about our policies and practices. And so with that rushed, I'm afraid, presentation, but I have so much to share with you. I'll turn this over to our esteemed panelists, and I'd be curious about their reaction. And also what I can learn from them, of course. Thank you for having me here at LSU today.
Thank you so much, Kieran. That was so full of good food for thought, for sure. And I'm sure we're going to have a lot of interest in pursuing some of these ideas some more. I wanted to see, can the rest of the panelists actually turn on their cameras? Great. So I'm going to begin by asking the panelists to reflect a bit on this and, from your perspective, think about what we're going to gain from COACHE and how that can help us moving forward. I think I'd like to start with our provost, Stacey Haney. I would love to hear some more from you about your vision for advancing faculty work from the academic affairs standpoint, with a highlight on opportunities that our participation in COACHE can provide.
Well, and I want to thank you, Dean Peterson, for your leadership on this effort. It's been terrific working with you and, as Dr. Matthews said, Dr. Wilson Kennedy, who are phenomenal talents on our campus, but an incredible group. First of all, I would want to recognize that we are approaching this, and you mentioned, Cynthia, from a really thoughtful, reflective place, and had begun wanting to have conversations around how do we think about our campus and build a stronger work environment, more satisfying, and thus more productive place to work. And Dr. Matthews mentioned the faculty of the future. This is year 31 for me. And I've had a phenomenal career at LSU and care deeply and passionately about our campus. And I want to ensure that not junior, but the pre-tenured faculty who are joining us today are as excited about LSU and their year 31 as I am today in mine. And we know that we have challenges and we can make assumptions about them, or we can do what scholars do. We can actually investigate and bring data to bear. And as Dr. Matthews said, leverage that data. And I think the other piece that is exciting for us is one, and you mentioned this as well, Dean Peterson, but we can benchmark to our peers to know where we have larger challenges and need to tackle them. But I think most critically, listen. Once we have these data, to then begin the conversations with our faculty to build a path forward that is a collective vision. So it's not that I'm going to say what our future needs to be, but we collectively as a community will tackle what those serious issues are for us and build that path forward. And what I commit certainly as provost is this will not be something that will sit on a shelf, but we will tackle the challenges that our faculty bring to us.
Thank you so much. I'm going to remind the audience that there's the chat box here, and we are happy for you to post any questions that you have in the chat box. I'd like to turn to Sam Bentley for a minute, our Vice President for Research and Economic Development. So Sam, one of your priorities as the VP for ORED is removing impediments to research productivity for our faculty. So how do you think COACHE is going to help us better understand opportunities and challenges for faculty as they pursue their scholarly work? And what do you think it's going to help? What do you think it's going to do to help us support scholarship in new and different ways?
Well, thanks, Cynthia. And I'd like to reiterate Stacey's gratitude for Cynthia's work and Zakia's work on this project, which has its roots at least 4 years ago, probably longer, when y'all began targeting a first proposal to the advanced program at NSF. I see two specific ways in which the COACHE survey, particularly embedded within the advanced project, can impact the campus. First of all, simply by studying the responses of the faculty, I'm anticipating we'll be able to identify some systemic issues that related to workloads, related to connectivity, related to equity across campus that will be very valuable to us. But within the context of the advanced project and with the capabilities of the great team of social scientists that we have across LSU, I also see opportunities for basic research into really exciting models, like the Boyer model that Kieran was just pointing out for professional development. New ways of tackling promotion and tenure, of tackling workloads, because to really do a great job, our faculty need to be at their most primed, at their most creative to really achieve their greatest. And there's actually a third way. Well, this will play in, I hope, with some of the projects that we have going on right now in the Office of Research and Economic Development. I've commissioned about 6 months ago a series of studies by faculty to essentially look at the landscape for key areas of research and development, beginning with to essentially understand the landscape, who's doing what kind of work in some of these areas. Specifically, one group is the Exploratory Committee for Biotechnology Research, and another one is the Exploratory Committee for Diversity Research, which is really looking at diversity, equity, and social justice. Who's doing work in these areas? How connected are they? And what we're finding for both of these teams is that across the campus, there's a tremendous amount of effort going on, but the faculty are largely isolated from one another. And I think one of my mantras, as you guys know, is connectivity, bringing together people and resources to do greater work. And I'm hoping that that this survey data and the great research that's going to go along with it will help us be able to bridge some of those gaps that separate researchers to become more collaborative, more team focused, and more innovative in our work.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to get a perspective from Isaiah Warner. So Isaiah is the Vice President for Strategic Initiatives. You've been a leader on our campus for many years. You've headed the Office of Strategic Initiatives and spearheaded lots of innovative programming aimed at diversity, equity, and inclusion for many years. And there have been strong outcomes. We have LSU graduates who've really benefited from your vision. So with regards to COACHE providing us a better understanding of our campus, can you share some thoughts you might have about how it can help us for advancing faculty work from an inclusive excellence standpoint?
You're muted.
Yeah. Isaiah, you're
So
muted.
sorry about that. Yes. I'd like to talk. First of all, I said that we are bringing COACHE to campus at exactly the right time. I am co-chairing more recently with Jane Cassidy, a committee which you're also on. And that committee is designed to achieve a number of objectives, particularly diversifying the faculty. And we have more than 45 faculty and staff that have participated on this committee. And we're working on 22 different action items. We've completed the first draft of a guidebook for faculty searches. And we have also created an environment where faculty with diverse create an environment where faculty with diverse background feel welcome, respected, and valued. We further desire to ensure that extraordinary efforts in mentorship and committee work do not go unrecognized. And the recommendations in our documents that we've generated so far are based on information gleaned from our own departmental protocols, from similar documents at peer institutions and literature available. And certainly the kinds of things that Dr. Matthews is talking about will add greatly to our project. And we have created mentorship guides, and particularly we're also focusing on efforts to reward faculty that do an extraordinary amount of service work, which we know that minorities and women are often having to do those kinds of work, and it's often not rewarded. And so I think Coach can add greatly to this document that we're about to generate. And I'm looking forward to getting all of the information from Coach to help us generate a first-class document.
Thank you so much. Dr. Matthews, I'd actually like to continue to sort of pick your brain a little bit in terms of your thoughts about lessons learned from Coach and leading the faculty of the future. I know that you had additional insights that you wanted to provide about faculty searches, or how to bust up a faculty search. I don't know what you were referring to, but do you have other thoughts in this context that you think would be pertinent to share with us right now?
Well, thanks, Dean Peterson. My own, I've gone on my own journey. In 17 years, I've been at Harvard, and most of them at Coach. When Coach began, we started as a pre-tenure survey of faculty job satisfaction, and then later added tenured faculty, and then full-time non-tenured track, and then community colleges, and now we're covering more issues of leadership and governance, and how senior administrators and faculty leaders work together. But through all of this, we've brought this equity lens. Our purpose, our mission is to increase the diversity of the faculty ranks. And yet, after 20 years and 35 years of the project's founders working on this, we've made precious little progress, really. We've made progress, but not as much as we'd hope, not even close. And so what I've recognized in the last few years is that Coach has been complicit a bit in the sort of the deficit narrative, which is to look at the data and say, how can we equip minoritized faculty, women in STEM, faculty who are the onlys, tend to be the onlys in the room. How can we equip them with the tools and the insights and the support that they need to get through and succeed at this university? I think that's necessary, but that is really insufficient, because what we're doing is we're making them do all the work. We're making them contort to our system, which a lot of research is showing has been showing now over and over again. The system is exclusive, and not in a good way, not in the kind of club that you want to be in. It's in a way that really harms people and people's lives. So I think in the last few years, I've turned Coach, and I think the conversation elsewhere is turning, and we're joining that conversation, not necessarily leading it. That the center of change really needs to be on the policies, on the practices, on the power that majority faculty have, who get by without even thinking about having to deal with the kinds of experiences that many women and faculty of color have to deal with every single day just to get by. So this is that argument about inclusive excellence. This is about interrogating our assumptions about service, about negotiations, which women and faculty of color are systematically disadvantaged in, those kinds of salary negotiations, and about being more deliberate and designed in our approach to our university, rather than just inherit the university that we have without wondering where it came from. So that's, I think, the kind of if I could leave everyone with anything, it's that to question our own assumptions about what the university is, why it's here, and who wrote the rules, and think about what a new university might be like if we just let go of if folks like me just let go of the steering wheel and let somebody else author, or at least co-author, the future of the university.
Wow, thank you. I hearken back to something that Isaiah said, and that is that Coach is coming at a really good time for LSU. It's just, we're in the middle of a lot of very important conversations, and I hope we can rise to that challenge. We're getting some questions, and one individual asked a question that I'd really like to open up to all of you. I'd love to hear what changes you all anticipate or are prepared to make in response to survey results.
Sounds like a provost question to me.
Well, again, I don't think any of us want to prejudge what the possibilities are, but I think when you look at the breadth of changes that have come across different institutions who have utilized the COACHE survey opportunity, some have focused on global engagement, others on ways to support parental leave, others on a promotion and tenure task force to look at that, others focusing on how we change responsible conduct and ethics, and instilling that focus on campuses. So I think that, I will say, and certainly Isaiah noted the work that we've been doing over the past year. And I saw Dr. Riveras is here, who has helped lead our efforts around building our roadmap to diversity. And I think this is a time where our campus is engaged in challenging conversations that really are at the core of the kind of university we want to be. And we see that again with the Title IX report recently, and the very meaningful and substantive change that I know will come from that as well. And Isaiah said the timing couldn't have been better. We didn't imagine any of this when we were submitting this grant. We knew that we need to be focused on a really positive environment for our faculty, who inspire me every day. And, my job is to help ensure their success in the same way that my job is to help ensure the success of our students on our campus as well. And I would just note, in conversations with our students, and we've had the last several years, our largest, most academically qualified and diverse student body in the history of LSU. And those students are telling us that they want to see a more diverse faculty. So it's listening to those students we serve, and then also finding ways that we can support those faculty. So I look forward to these conversations, and then really challenging ourselves with initiatives that can help achieve, again, a future for our faculty where they will be positioned to move LSU forward even more as the flagship research intensive institution for our state.
Thanks. I'm wondering, Kieran, do you have a perspective on this from your coach, through your coach lens, if you will?
Yeah, thanks, Dean Peterson. There are many. I think the provost is right not to prejudge what might change as a result of LSU's particular results. I'd love Isaiah's teeing this up with a framework. I mean, he's got a whole plan in place where the data will either support or maybe not support, and be prepared to maybe change some assumptions about those expectations in that plan. So that is leaps and bounds ahead of where many universities are at this point in their kind of coach engagement. But the thing I want to also emphasize is this isn't a survey of telling your president or provost what to do. It's that, but there's a fair amount of the outcomes of these surveys are about what faculty themselves need to change and have the power to change. So it's about faculty telling faculty, hey, I don't feel welcome here, I don't feel supported, or I do feel welcome and I do feel supported. And how do we, capture that lightning in a bottle and spread that around the campus? So, so the results tend to fall into three categories: things that administrators need to do, things that faculty need to do, and things that administrators and faculty need to come together to do. Those tend to be the longer term projects, but that's what you can expect to happen here, I bet.
Thank you. There are a couple of questions that I feel like I need to address from my perspective, because I'm actually the university contact that gets reports on what our completion rate is for the survey, et cetera. And so I've had people asking, so 40% sounds good. Does that represent diversity in terms of the ranks of people responding, in terms of, ethnicity, et cetera, disciplinary breadth, or is it mostly STEM folks? And what I will say from the reports I'm getting, I don't know the answer to any of those things. I wonder if Kieran, we do have a question about whether or not, particularly pre-tenure faculty, are perhaps hesitant to respond, wondering if, it might be somehow held against them, even though it is anonymous. Do you have any comments about what you generally get? Because I don't have any of that data in terms of our respondents.
Well, you've asked a very dangerous question, because this is my dissertation. This was my dissertation topic, right? So you want my job talk? I don't think I want to punish anybody with that. So first, I'm about to put in the chat a link to Virginia Tech's COACHE report. They got their data last year, maybe 2 years ago. And there's a section of that report that tells you what their, I think it was last year, will tell you what their distribution was for response rates, and then what all universities' distributions were for response rates. It doesn't do that by discipline, but it does by gender, race, rank, tenure status, maybe one or two other things. Virginia Tech, they put their report up online, public for all to see, so this is their punishment, I guess. But what I want to say about trends is, the group that's least likely to respond, in fact, are long-term associate professors. Our associate professors who have been in that rank for let's say more than 6 years. That's not necessarily long-term, but that we start to include folks who've been there 12 years and longer. And the analysis suggested that it's faculty who feel like maybe the institution's given up on them, that they've done all the right things, and maybe they haven't been recognized or appreciated enough for that support. Where we see improvements in response rates by institutions who do this over and over again are those institutions who actually make change, lead change, starting from these data. And then when they make those changes, and then the town halls and the symposia and in every corner of the university that they can, will say, we started with the COACHE data, which told us X. This is why we're doing this workshop now, or this is why we've changed this policy. It all began here. So that when they ask their faculty again to participate in 3 years or 4 years down the road, they have a credible basis for saying this makes a difference. Purdue University once said, we spent $5 million on faculty raises as a result of the COACHE survey. I wouldn't draw the line that clearly between a survey and that kind of outcome. I'm not making any promises, but I think what the provost will do in COACHE's future administration is to say, here's what we did, and you'll generate a good response there. 40% at this point in the survey administration is very strong for a sprawling research university where it's hard to get through people. Liberal arts colleges tend to see like an 80% response rate by the time we're done. You're not going to get that here. That just doesn't happen. People have other things going on, and that's okay. But you will see in your report some sense of that distribution and whether that's representative of the faculty as a whole.
Thank you. There's a good question that is came in through the Q&As, and that is, it's a challenging question. How do we factor in advising graduate students across R1 universities so that workload, this gets back to your workload issue, Kieran, right? Workload is more equitable. Many minoritized faculty advise far, far more students than their white counterparts.
I would love to hear from your LSU colleagues first to give them a chance to chime in on that if they want.
Yes.
I'd like to say something in that regard. I think minority faculty in general, well, let me speak about myself. I feel a need to give considerable service. And it's because of my background, where I've come from. I should not be where I am. I have a PhD in chemistry, But I am also the first in my family, immediate family, to get a high school diploma, let alone a PhD in chemistry. So I feel a need to reach back and do lots of service. But at the same time, I don't accept failure at anything. And I have worked hard on my scholarship. And so my scholarship is among the best in my department. But in order to do both of those things, I have had to work doubly hard. And when I look around at the friends I have in chemistry, I don't have any friends in chemistry. My friends are my students, my postdocs. No one in chemistry really socializes with me. And I'm nearing the end of my career. I'm within a year or so of retiring. And it has been a somewhat lonely existence. And I think that's generally true because I'm talking to some young faculty right now, 2 African-American males who were turned down for tenure, but the tenure was reversed at the higher level. They're having the same sort of existence. So unless you have a strong constitution, it is difficult as a minority, particularly in the sciences, to compete. Maybe that's the word I want to use.
Thank you, Isaiah.
Cynthia, may I follow up on
Please.
that? Of course,
Yes.
it's always a challenge to follow Isaiah with anything, but I have a bit of experience from a former job that I had at a Canadian university that has always been an interesting model for me to think about at LSU. I was at Memorial University of Newfoundland, and there, all faculty who were supervising graduate students got teaching credit for their graduate student supervision. And so if you had to teach, if you had to have N units of teaching credit each year, your graduate student supervision counted towards that. And it was an equalizing model. Not necessarily saying that I would, I wouldn't know where to start with something like that here, but it worked quite well in terms of equalizing loads.
Thank you. I actually have one more question. I'm watching time, so maybe I shouldn't throw this out. But Kieran, I'd like to ask you if you can make any comments about how COACHE this year is going to be gathering information about COVID and how you think that's actually going to impact the survey overall.
Thanks for that question, Cynthia. We've added a few new questions to the survey this year about faculty's experiences with COVID. And we centrally have an opportunity to kind of create, to aggregate data and to report out, and more broadly, research on the experience of faculty right now this semester. We also had the survey in the field a year ago this time. And so we did an analysis of kind of pre-March 10th and post-March 10th of how faculty responded differently. We found there that faculty gave much more favorable ratings to their leaders, to the institutional leaders in the second half of the survey administration, because I think we're all willing to give people a pass for doing the right thing. I talked to many provosts over the summer who said, if you surveyed my faculty now, you would get a very different response. What we're doing this year is LSU is one of the few universities in this semester, in this year's cohort, COACHE cohort, that is taking the survey for the first time. We have universities like Chapel Hill and many other R1s like LSU who have taken the survey 2, 3, 4 times over the last dozen years. And we're speaking with doctoral candidates and recent doctoral graduates now to find somebody who wants to, and this is actually a call to you at LSU. If you have somebody you want to send our way and be considered for this analytical opportunity, we want to look and understand, what's changed at these universities as a result. And that could help LSU understand what might be happening at your institution as well in a longitudinal way that you don't have the benefit of if you just do your own survey and go it alone. So we expect to have some findings like that. What we're also interested in seeing, though, is not just that longitudinal, but within this cohort. So compared to these other universities that are participating right now, who is bucking the trend? Who's doing really well in the areas where everyone else maybe isn't? Is it support for teaching? Is it in those shared governance aspects that I mentioned earlier? Because what we do at COACHE is we find not that central tendency, but the performance frontier. Who are the universities? Where might be the schools or colleges that are really supporting their faculty well, and what can we learn from them that others can benefit from? So that's what you have to look forward to, I hope, at the strategy workshop that we host for your COACHE team on campus that we'll be hosting virtually this summer once the results are delivered.
Thank you so much. I don't know about the rest of you, but I feel like this hour has really flown by. This has been a rich discussion and inspiring and challenging, thought-provoking. I want to thank everybody on the panel for participating, and certainly thank the audience too. I imagine there's some people who are wondering, what's next? And so I do want to say that something that's an asset that I'm really looking forward to is, again, the transparent reporting. So we are going to get a large data set back, and the central administration has a commitment to sharing the findings. The provost has put together a core committee that has members from across the university who'll be guiding the process, and there are going to be focus groups to debrief the findings, get additional faculty input as we prioritize steps that we can take to improve the faculty experience at LSU. I've been really interested to see outcomes, some of which Dr. Matthews mentioned at other universities, and I'm really excited to see what new opportunities emerge on our campus. So thanks again to all of our panelists. Thank you again to the audience members and for the really good questions we got, and wish everyone a very good evening.
Thanks everyone for this privilege. It's really been my pleasure to be with you tonight.
Thanks, Kieran.
Thank you, Cynthia, for putting this together.
Absolutely. It's been a really nice night, and I look forward to see where we go with it.
Thanks, Cynthia. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Kieran.
Thanks, everyone. That was really a great presentation. Really, really great.
Thanks, Steve. You're on a great show here.
We try.